Hopefully you've been enjoying the coverage thus far of Norway Chess. Today we concluded the 8th round out of 10, and going into today, Alireza Firouzja had a 1-point lead over Magnus Carslen. That doesn't really mean much for the standings because a classical win gets you 3 points. It's not like traditional standings where a win gets you 1, and so Magnus has an opportunity to overtake Alireza at the conclusion of today's games. Magnus was playing against Aryan Tari, obviously, that's why they were in the thumbnail of the video, and the two of them are the numbers 1 and 2 in Norway, but are over like 200 points rating difference, and so I was just wondering, do you guys know what other country has such a gap between number 1 and number 2? Let me know in the comments. Let's look at the games. So we get a Rui Lopez, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4, Magnus castles, bishop e7, d3, and b5. So first things first, the main line Rui is rook e1. This is considered just the mainest of the main lines. So Magnus instead goes for d3, and after d6 plays a4. This is already pretty unique. As far as the Rui goes, it's pretty off the beaten path. I mean, it's still relatively well known, and actually Magnus himself has played this with white against Ding Liren in 2017. Bishop d7, the point is that if take, now the rook is actually protected. And actually in these lines, Magnus was giving this pawn away. And the whole point is black takes the pawn, damages his structure, but has an extra pawn, which is good. It's good to have an extra pawn. All right, video over. See you next time. But I think Magnus just had a feeling that Aryan might not go for this because it gives Magnus too much central control, and he didn't. I mean, he never took the pawn until Magnus took, and then rook e1. And well, now is really the question, what does Aryan do? All of his pieces are developed. Does he bring his knight back here and try to focus on the center of the board? Does he play h6, going after this bishop? The problem is that Magnus wants this trade because that allows him to put a really dominant bishop on d5, reroute the knight backwards, and just fight for the light squares in the center, since black put 3 dark squared pawns in a triangle. That means all the light squares are weak. But Aryan goes for b4, which Magnus described in the interview afterward. He just felt like Aryan was going for exchanges a little bit too much. And so what he did is, he traded the knights, but now Aryan's got all these dark squared pawns, and yeah, the light squares are just incredibly weak. And so queen c2, bishop b5, and even with this trade now occurs, and this position, from a positional and strategic standpoint, rather than a tactical one, is just busted for black. You are left with a dark squared bishop and 3 dark squared pawns. So Magnus here plays the best move. What is the best move here for white from a positional standpoint? It's an advanced move with an advanced idea. You can pause here if you'd like, but I'm about to tell you after I take a sip. The best move, if you're looking at things like c4, you're not incorrect, but c4 is wrong because it has no long-term goal. The move is knight d2 with a long-term goal of getting to those 2 squares. Whether it's like this, or whether it's just to hang out here and put pressure. Queen c6 and queen to a4, pinning the rook, knight to c4, and g3. This just is a good move in the long run. Maybe you'll advance your pawns. You also give some breathing room for your king. Now Magnus brings the queen back and brings all the pieces to the king side. He will probably infiltrate on this side of the board. Tari did not put up a whole lot of resistance, I have to tell you. First, Magnus trades 1 rook. He brings that rook all the way into Tari's territory, and then plays knight back to e3, securing the outpost on d5, rook a7, again, avoiding the trade of the rook, and h3. This move is the killer. It is the killer. After h3, the position, despite complete material equality, is +7 for white. I cannot stress that enough. +7. Essentially, what that means is white has essentially a rook and 2 pawn advantage, or 2 pieces and a pawn. It's because black is helpless. You're going to march this pawn forward, plant the knight, and win the game. And that's exactly what Magnus does, even against f6, because you cannot take here. And Magnus ends the game in style with a very flashy move, not the only winning move, but rook e8. And the point is that if queen takes, you have check. You could have done that without playing that, but now you see the point. The queen no longer defends the pawn. Rook g7, you take the queen. Bishop g7, you play knight to f6. Cannot take. And if you take like this, I take the queen. Yes, for a move or two, you will have a rook and a bishop for the queen. But let's not forget that you will lose both pawns, and I will just destroy you. Or Magnus, in this case, will destroy Aryan. And so in the game, king h8, knight f6. And Aryan Tari resigned with a combined set of threats, and the queen also hanging. Convincing win for Magnus, who picks up 3 points. Aryan not able to keep up with his world champion opponent, and, well, who can really blame the guy, huh? The second interesting matchup of the day was between Caruana and Firouzja. And this one's really interesting because, you're about to find out. Another Carlsen and f3. Now you see the name above me. Fantasy. The fantasy variation of the Carlsen, because here you want a position where you have full control of the center and pieces out and castling with the open F file. Now there's a lot of things that you can play against the fantasy. Personally, I play e6, blocking in this bishop, but then kind of turning the game into a French and then expanding on the queen side. I used to play what Alireza played in this game, which is take, take, and e5. Because if you take, you don't take the queen, but you actually play check, and the pawn in the center is attacked. This is very bad for white. Of course, people don't take, but they play knight f3. Bishop g4, and now c3, and bishop d3. This is a new main line. It used to be that everybody played bishop c4. This was insanely popular. It's what I studied, but it's not popular anymore. And now everybody does this. And actually, Firouzja was spending a lot of time here. He was down a ton of time in the opening, which is pretty surprising at the 2700 level so early. So we got knight f6 from him, castles, bishop d6, and knight a3. Kind of a weird move from Caruana. Engine was already giving some overwhelming advantage for white. I really like white's position. The point is you want to go here, so b5, but now we see the second idea to put the knight here and hit the bishop. Now we see the third idea to bring this knight all the way to f5, where Firouzja just says, look, man, if you take, I'm good giving you the bishop pair. I'm fine. It's all good. But that's why Caruana goes queen here. In reality, Caruana apparently had to just go all in on the king side. So he had to play like queen e1. And if here, then like something like knight 3h4, queen g3, bishop g5, and just go all in on that side of the board. Even as far as to sacrifice this pawn, potentially. Like, totally just all in. He didn't do that. He played queen c2, and that gave Firouzja a chance to break in the center with the move c5. And despite all of these trades, 3 moves in a row, resulting in a trade of pawns, and then this position, this looks terrible for Firouzja. If you just look, he's got 4 pawn islands. A pawn island being, a pawn that has no surrounding pawns. Normally, that's really bad. It's really, really bad. It's like really bad because your pawns are going to be really weak. But in this case, no, it actually wasn't so bad. So first, Alireza uses the open files to put some pressure on Fabi. He mobilizes his weakness, gluing his bishop in the center. Then he gets the queens off. And despite Fabi still having a positional advantage, he begins to target Fabiano's pawns. And continues to activate his pieces, continues to target his weaknesses. So he never gives Fabi a chance to consolidate in a perfect way and continues to be active. Like, look, he activates his king, activates both pawns. And Fabiano shuffled around and for a very long time looking for weaknesses. But Alireza got rid of them. First, he used the flank pawn push to trade off his A pawn. Then he traded off his doubled F pawn. And despite having 3 pawn islands remaining, there's no way to attack them. And then the players traded off their pawns. And it was on move 60, with the rook, bishop, and pawn each, that they called it and sent the game to an Armageddon. In the Armageddon, we repeated the opening. But Alireza did not. He went for g6, which is another way to play with bishop g7. Knight c3, bishop g7, and e5 from Fabi. Now it's like an advanced Caro-Kann, except g6, bishop g7 has been played. And Fabi puts his queen in the center. Bishop e6 by Alireza is a hilariously peculiar move. I think it's the main line, though. So is e6. The thing is that you want to do this, and after bishop b5, you just ignore the pin and put the knight on f5. That's your goal. But Fabi played a very nasty idea. He planted his queen on c5. Then he planted his bishop on e3. Then he put his knight on a4, and then he moved his pieces back and put his knight there. So Alireza didn't want that to happen. He didn't want to castle and then allow this knight to clamp down the position. So he sacked a pawn. The problem is that now he's just down a pawn. Even though he's activated his bishop, he's just down a pawn. And with 3 on 1, you have to advance on the queen side. That's exactly what Fabiano starts to do. Advances on the queen side. Then he consolidates his king for a moment, preventing any sort of pawn pushes, and starts to attack on the king side. So because in here he's got a space advantage and a material advantage, Fabi dictates where this game is going to be played. So he starts to kick this knight out. He kicks it out to g7. He continues to play on that side of the board. Alireza doesn't want the knight to end up on d4, completely shutting it down. So he sacrifices another pawn, but it's not enough. Fabiano brings in some pieces, gives a check, and plays f5, a beautiful move, opening the door for queen h6 mate. And, well, it's too little, too late. Everything gets shredded apart. And, actually, he is down a piece. It's bishop and knight and 2 bishops. But it ain't much. And now a nice move. Queen f4, transferring the queen to eye the bishop. Yes, the queen's guarding, but queen h4 is a mate threat. So we get rook d4. And Alireza just played on a little bit longer. But, resigned at the end when both rooks landed on the 8th rank. Of course, he could have resigned 15 moves ago. But he goes down in the Armageddon. He only picks up 1 point, not 1.5 points. And now he trails Magnus Carlsen by a point going into their matchup tomorrow. They will play tomorrow. Don't miss it. That's all I have to say. Oh, sorry, not tomorrow. At the time of recording this, it's not tomorrow. Tomorrow is a rest day. You're watching like 2 weeks in the future. They already played, sorry. At the time of recording, they will be playing on October 15th. Now, let's check the last matchup of the round. Now, I'm going to say this right now. You might as well drop your like and write your comment at this point, because this matchup was not that exciting. It really wasn't. That's why I saved it for last. The last time they played, these two had a dead-drawn game that somehow resulted in a losing rook endgame for Duda. This time, they played an accelerated dragon, resulting in a Maroczy structure, spelled Maro, M-A-R-O-C-Z-Y. And this is a very positional kind of idea from White, who sets up the cascading triangle. Well, it would be a triangle, but the top of it is missing. Like the waves like this. And has a nice bind, but the queens got traded. Then some pieces got traded. And then Duda gave away this pawn to create a dark squared opposite colored bishop blockade. And you can't play rook c1 because of bishop to h6. And like I said, not too exciting of a game. They just shuffled, and by the 30th move called it, and we go to Armageddon. This one was more interesting because this game you can actually learn something from. So it was a French. Now let's remember, Duda gets 7 minutes, he needs to draw. Aronian gets 10 minutes, he needs to win. A classical French with knight c3. Now, keep in mind what Duda plays here, if you're a French player or not. Against knight c3 or knight d2 guarding the center, you can trade and put the knight here. And here you can play bishop to d7 and bishop to c6. This is called the Fort Knox French. An interesting line, and in many positions, you try to trade this bishop for one of these knights, play c6, and just be very solid, but not have the bishop pair. Knight d7, knight f6, knight comes back to g3. I just accidentally clicked the entire game to go forward. And normally here it's take, and c6. However, Duda plays something unique here. He has played this before, so has Magnus Carlsen. And that guy's like a decent chess player, so when he plays, you should listen. And that move is g6, which doesn't look like crazy, but at the title player level, a new idea before the 10th move in a French, that's pretty unique. The point is simple, to play this move in castle and delay taking. So Aronian meets that with this. Aha, you can't castle. Duda says, all right, well, let's trade bishops. Aronian says, okay, but now you can't castle. Duda says, and? I'm just going to put my king on g7. And he's very solid. He's traded off his light-squared bishop. Almost every pawn he has is on a light square, replacing the light-squared bishop. And now he will play a5, trying to instigate on the queen side. Aronian here has to come up with something, so he goes for g4. But this is not a serious attack. Knight goes to d5, and queen comes to f4, offering a trade of queens. He gets it. He gets a knight trade. And now it's 2 rooks and a knight versus 2 rooks and a bishop. Let's see. Bishop back to e2, f4, and king f2, bishop f3. So he gets space, puts his bishop out this way, although it does look into a very solid structure. Rook d8, rook d3, and b6. And Duda basically just... Come and get me, baby. Come and get me. You're not going to hit me. There's nothing you can do. I am indestructible. Well, let's see. King e3, and Duda plays c5. The point is, a3 was played, but if you take, I'm going to go take, or in the words of our YouTube legend, we have captures on c5, black captures, white captures, black captures, captures on d3, and black captures on c5. And I mean, this position is equal. On a serious note, obviously, I'm very happy Agadmator is back. You guys were writing some funny comments, like, trying to hold it down while he's away, but it's great to have him back. I was planning to make a video doing some, impersonations or saying things and phrases that he says, but then I didn't know that he was going to return, so he returned quickly. So just good that he's happy and healthy and back to his grind. Anyway, king f8, pawn trades, rook trades, so many captures. Knight in 5 versus bishop in 5 should be a draw. Even with the 2 pawns here potentially making a passer, it's not enough. Very nice idea, by the way, g5. The point is that takes leads to this. That's just stupid. It's not good. And even with the activation of the king, black just guards on the dark squares. That's the thing. Light squared bishop only fights on light squares. Think about it. You got a piece here that has access to half the board. The other half it doesn't have any access to. This piece has access to all of the board, light and dark. So the knight, although a little bit hard to maneuver, like the bishop can hit the edge of the other side of the board in one move, the knight does fight on both sides and is able to create a defensive barrier. And here Duda puts up his dark squared resistance, kicks out the king, and with some more shuffling, under normal circumstances, this is a draw, but because Levon Aronian has to play for a win, and the players have like 3 seconds at this point, he tries his best. He shuffles around his pieces, and then Duda breaks with h5, and, well, Aronian's king goes for a smoke break, but forgets that he left the stove on, and, yeah, he's going for a smoke outside, but the kitchen is on fire. Suddenly the pawn has made it through. Suddenly the pawn is collapsing. Suddenly the pawn is collapsing over there. And it was here that he just resigned. Again, he was going to lose the Armageddon anyway because it was going to be a draw, but he decided to play on. So at least credit to him for that. And yeah. But Duda gets another win. Rough start for him at the beginning of the tournament, but he beats Aronian. 2 more games to go. I hope to make a fun recap video for you guys between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carslen. And that's all. That's all for now. Check out the courses. Check out the website in the description. Check out the Discord. And yeah, be good. See you in the next video.